All right, strap yourselves in because we're diving deep into one of those WWII mysteries that just never seems to go away.
Those ones that really get you thinking.
Exactly. Foo Fighters. Now, maybe you've heard the name before, but have you ever really thought about what they were?
Or what people back then thought they were.
Yeah. So picture this. You're a pilot in the middle of World War II. Things are already pretty intense, right?
Oh, yeah, I'd say.
And then you see it, like a glowing orb, or sometimes even a ball of light just kind of dancing around your aircraft.
And not just one pilot either.
Right. We're talking reports from both sides, Allied and Axis pilots, all throughout the war.
It wasn't just a one-off, like a quick flash and it's gone. These things stuck around.
Like they wanted to put on a show.
Almost like they were curious about the planes.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it?
Mm.
These weren't just rumors. These were experienced pilots.
People who knew what they were looking at up in the air.
People whose lives depended on knowing what was up there.
Right, and they were seeing something they couldn't explain.
Imagine that. You're in a bomber, flak exploding all around you, and then
this glowing thing just appears out of nowhere.
Yeah. It's no wonder these sightings kind of mess with the pilots, you know.
Oh, absolutely. It would be enough to make anyone question what they were seeing.
Right, and that's the thing. It wasn't just one side saying, oh, we saw something weird. Both sides were reporting these Foo Fighters.
One of the sources I read even mentioned that the term Foo Fighter that came from the Allies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was probably from a comic strip that was popular at the time, something about a goofy character called Smokey Stover who would yell, "Where there's foo, there's fire."
So they just took Foo from that and slapped it onto these mysterious objects.
Seems like it. And you know what's even funnier? The Axis pilots, they had their own names for them. Things like kraut balls. Not most elegant, but hey, different cultures, right?
Oh, kraut balls.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. But, you know, it just shows you how widespread this thing was.
It was global.
From Europe to the Pacific, pilots from all these different countries.
Speaking different languages with different backgrounds.
But they were all seeing basically the same thing.
Glowing orbs moving in ways that just didn't make sense for any aircraft they knew.
So we know they saw something, but the real question is,
what was it they were actually seeing?
Okay, so we've got these consistent sightings from all over the place. But what were they actually seeing? What did these Foo Fighters look like?
Well, if you go by the reports, they usually looked like glowing orbs.
Okay, that tracks.
Or balls of light, sometimes with a kind of metallic sheen or a reddish color.
Interesting. And they just kind of appeared. No sound, no engine noise.
Silent most of the time. And the way they moved, it was almost effortless, like they were gliding.
I bet that was unsettling. But it's their movement that really gets to you, isn't it?
It's what really throws you for a loop. Pilots said they'd make these sudden, sharp turns.
And I read they could really pick up speed, too.
Oh, yeah, sometimes incredibly fast. And some even talked about them defying gravity.
Like just floating there.
Yeah.
No way.
They were doing things that no plane at that time could do. It was like they were playing with physics.
Now, I don't know about you, but if I saw that in the middle of a war, I'd probably think I was losing it.
I think anyone would. And that's what keeps us coming back to this mystery, even today.
Is it possible that they really were breaking the laws of physics? Or could there be some explanation, maybe something we haven't even thought of yet?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What were these Foo Fighters, really?
So we've got these glowing orbs acting like they own the sky, and pilots on both sides are freaking out. What were people thinking back then? What were some of the early theories?
Well, back then, with all the tension and uncertainty of the war going on, I'd say people's imaginations were running pretty wild.
I bet. So what were some of the ideas floating around? Did anyone think these Foo Fighters might be, something from another planet?
Aliens. Oh, that definitely came up later, especially after the war when the whole UFO craze started. But during the war itself, most of the theories were a bit more grounded, you could say.
Okay, so what, like secret weapons and stuff? Makes sense, given it was World War II.
Exactly. Everyone was trying to figure out if the other side had some kind of secret tech up their sleeve.
I mean, it was a time of crazy technological advancements, right? Jets, rockets, radar. Who knows what else they were cooking up?
That's what made the Foo Fighters so unsettling. They fit right into that atmosphere of paranoia and suspicion.
Did anyone actually think the Foo Fighters were, like, A Nazi superweapon?
Some did. There were all these rumors about secret German projects, advanced aircraft, even wonder weapons that could turn the tide of the war.
So some folks thought maybe the Nazis had cracked the code on anti-gravity or something,
Some theories went in that direction for sure, especially since there were some German engineers actually experimenting with disc-shaped aircraft designs at the time.
like those flying saucer things you see in old sci-fi movies.
Exactly. So the idea that the Foo Fighters might be some kind of top secret Nazi weapon wasn't totally out there, at least not in the context of the time.
But was there ever any real evidence to support that?
That's the thing, no. No wreckage of any such advanced aircraft was ever found. No blueprints, no documents, nothing concrete.
And you'd think if the Nazis had some super weapon that could win them the war, they would have, used it.
Right, it would have been their ace in the hole. But it never materialized beyond those mysterious sightings.
So the Nazi superweapon theory, while exciting, probably more fiction than fact.
Yeah, probably fueled more by wartime fears and rumors than actual evidence.
Okay, but what about the other side? Could the Allies have been testing some secret tech that they mistook for Foo Fighters?
Some researchers have looked into that possibility too. Maybe some early prototypes of jet aircraft or experimental radar systems or even some kind of, I don't know, advanced drone technology.
So basically, everyone was looking at each other suspiciously, wondering if the Foo Fighters were someone's secret weapon.
That was the prevailing mindset, yeah. But again, no hard evidence ever surfaced to back up any of those claims.
No smoking gun, so to speak.
Exactly. So while the secret weapon theories were tempting, they didn't really hold up under scrutiny.
Which brings us back to those natural phenomena explanations. We talked about ball lightning and St. Elmo's fire earlier. Could those really account for what pilots were seeing?
It's worth considering, for sure. Ball lightning, for example, it's this weird phenomenon where you basically get a glowing ball of plasma.
Plasma, like Star Wars stuff.
Kind of. It's superheated, electrified air, and it can appear during thunderstorms. And the crazy thing is, it can last for a while, sometimes even minutes, and move in these really strange, unpredictable ways.
Like floating through walls and stuff. I've heard stories.
Some accounts even say that, so you can see why some people thought maybe ball lightning was behind some of the Foo Fighter sightings.
Yeah, glowing orbs, erratic movements, kind of fits, right?
The visuals definitely line up. But there are some problems with the ball lightning theory, too. While it can move erratically, it doesn't usually exhibit the kind of sustained, controlled movements that many Foo Fighter reports describe.
So maybe ball lightning explains some sightings, but not all of them.
That's the tricky part with all these theories. It's hard to find one that fits every single report.
Okay, so ball lightning is a maybe. What about St. Elmo's fire? I remember seeing something about that in a documentary once, but I can't recall exactly what it is.
It's another electrical phenomenon, but it's more of a discharge, like static electricity building up and then releasing.
Like when you get a shock from touching a doorknob.
Exactly, but on a much grander scale. It often happens on ships, like on the masts during a storm, but it can also happen on aircraft.
So if an airplane flew through a certain kind of weather, you could get St. Elmo's fire on the wings or the propellers.
Exactly, and it creates this glowing aura, sometimes crackling with electricity. It can be quite a sight.
But could that really be mistaken for a solid object, like a glowing orb flying around?
That's where the St. Elmo's fire explanation gets a bit shaky. It's usually localized, concentrated around the point where the electricity is discharging.
So you might see a glow around the wing, but not a separate ball of light zipping around independently.
Right. So, while St. Elmo's fire could create some unusual lights, it doesn't quite fit the descriptions of Foo Fighters moving around like independent objects.
Okay, so we've got ball lightning and St. Elmo's fire, both interesting, but not entirely convincing as explanations for all the Foo Fighter sightings.
It seems like we keep hitting these roadblocks.
Which leaves us with...
The psychological explanation, the idea that maybe, just maybe, some of these sightings were, well, in the pilots' heads.
Hallucinations? You mean like they were imagining things?
It might sound far-fetched, but think about the conditions these pilots were flying in. Constant stress, fatigue, sleep deprivation, the sheer terror of combat.
Their minds and bodies were pushed to the absolute limit.
Exactly. And we know that in extreme situations like for solo sailors or people lost in the wilderness, the mind can start playing tricks on you.
You start seeing things that aren't really there.
And for these pilots, surrounded by darkness, explosions, and the constant threat of enemy attack, their senses were probably on high alert, maybe even overloaded.
So it's possible their brains were trying to make sense of all that chaos, filling in the gaps with, well, Foo Fighters.
That's the thinking behind the psychological explanation, and it's supported by some of the reports, too. Some pilots describe Foo Fighters disappearing when they tried to get closer, which could be consistent with a hallucination fading as you focus on it.
Hmm, that's interesting. But if it was all in their heads, why were pilots on both sides of the war seeing the same thing?
That's the big question mark hanging over the psychological theory. If it was purely a product of stress and imagination, you'd expect to see more variation in the descriptions, maybe even some cultural influences creeping in.
Like American pilots seeing different hallucinations than German pilots.
Exactly. But the consistency of the reports across different cultures, different languages, it's a tough one to explain away as just a coincidence.
So where does that leave us? We've looked at secret weapons, natural phenomena, and even hallucinations, and none of them seem to fully crack the code of the Foo Fighters.
And that's the beauty of this mystery, isn't it? It keeps us guessing, keeps us searching for answers.
It's like a giant puzzle where some of the pieces are missing, and we're left to fill in the blanks as best we can.
And who knows, maybe there isn't one single answer. Maybe it's a combination of factors.
Bit of secret tech here, a dash of ball lightning there, maybe even a sprinkle of hallucination.
The possibilities are endless, and that's what keeps this mystery alive, even after all these years.
Okay, so we've dug into the what are the Foo Fighters, the sightings, the explanations, the mystery itself, but now I'm curious about the so what? Like, what did these unexplained encounters actually mean for the people involved, especially the pilots in the middle of a war?
Yeah, that human element that sometimes gets lost in all the talk about science and technology and aliens.
Totally. We're talking about real people, often young guys, facing incredible danger and stress, and then they're suddenly seeing these things that defy explanation.
Yeah.
Did the military, did they actually take these reports seriously? Or was it all just brushed off as pilot fatigue or wartime jitters?
Well, from what I've gathered, it seems like the military's reaction was a mixed bag. Some allied forces, particularly the U.S. Army Air Forces, they definitely investigated these sightings.
Understandable, right? They had to be sure it wasn't some new enemy weapon, especially after they encountered those German jets late in the war.
Exactly. They couldn't take any chances. But the question is, did those investigations ever lead to any real answers?
Did they ever figure out what the Foo Fighters were?
That's the thing, not really, or at least not anything that was ever made public. Remember, this was a time of intense secrecy, especially when it came to military matters.
So it's possible that there are reports or findings about the Foo Fighters tucked away in some classified file somewhere.
Could be. Maybe someday those files will be declassified and we'll get a clearer picture. But for now, we're left with a lot of unanswered questions.
But even if they couldn't figure out what they were, just the fact that these reports were circulating, it must have had some impact on the war itself, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being one of those pilots. You're already flying dangerous missions under immense pressure, and then you see something. You can't explain something that seems to break the laws of physics. It had to mess with their heads, even for the most experienced pilots.
No kidding.
Yep.
And it makes you wonder how those encounters might have affected things on a larger scale. Like, did it impact morale? Did it change how missions were planned or how pilots made decisions in combat?
Those are great questions, and they highlight a really important point. Even if the Foo Fighters weren't enemy weapons, just the fear and uncertainty they created could have had real consequences.
It's like the mystery itself became part of the war, even if no shots were fired over it. And speaking of impact, let's talk about the legacy of the Foo Fighters. They've clearly captured the public imagination, showing up in movies, books, TV shows. It's like they've become a cultural icon.
Absolutely. The Foo Fighters, they've become almost synonymous with WWII UFO sightings. They represent this perfect blend of history, mystery, and the unknown.
It's a powerful combination, and it's clearly resonated with people for decades. But why? What is it about this particular mystery that keeps people so captivated? I mean, there have been tons of UFO sightings and unexplained phenomena, but the Foo Fighters seem to hold a special place in our collective memory.
I think part of it is the historical context. World War II was such a monumental event, a global conflict with incredible stakes. And the idea that something else might have been going on, something unexplained, maybe even supernatural, it just adds another layer of intrigue to an already fascinating period.
It's like a hidden chapter in the history books, a glimpse into something that official accounts might have missed or glossed over. And the descriptions of the Foo Fighters themselves, the glowing orbs, the impossible movements, it's all very otherworldly, very sci-fi, which taps into our fascination with what might be out there beyond our understanding.
Exactly. And then there's the fact that even after all these years with all our scientific advances, we still don't have a definitive explanation for what they were. That unresolved mystery, it keeps people coming back, trying to solve the puzzle, looking for new evidence or a new perspective. It's a mystery that continues to evolve as new information emerges.
And at its heart, it makes us ask some fundamental questions about ourselves and our place in the universe. If we were those pilots back then, what would we have thought? How would we have reacted? What does it say about us as human beings that
Yeah.
we're so drawn to the unexplained?
Those questions are at the core of what makes this whole exploration so fascinating. The Foo Fighters, they're not just about lights in the sky. They're about our human response to the unknown, our curiosity, our fear, our desire to make sense of the world around us, even when it seems to defy logic or explanation.
It's been a wild ride exploring this enduring mystery. We've gone through eyewitness accounts, we've explored all kinds of theories, and we've seen how the Foo Fighters have left their mark on both history and our cultural imagination. And while we may never have all the answers, I think we've gained a deeper appreciation for the complexity of this phenomenon and the power of the unknown.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway. Sometimes the journey of exploring the unknown is just as rewarding as finding a clear-cut answer. The Foo Fighters, they remind us that there's still so much out there that we don't understand, and that's okay. Embracing that uncertainty, that sense of wonder, is part of what makes life so interesting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Foo Fighters. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows, maybe you'll even spot a Foo Fighter of your own.